So once upon a time, I was in the Canadian Army for a year training, which, if you were to meet me for 10 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes, and then have that fact kind of be released onto you, your reaction would probably be, really? You? Because I'm not that guy. Like, I'm not Army guy. And all of my friends would attest to this. Not just my personality and my upbringing, my background, but even my politics. I was always the guy who, would quote Bobby Kennedy and the poet Aeschylus, that we should aim to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. And I actually do believe that it's not naive to think that we should try to create a world with no war, with no armies, with no violence. I think it's possible. Like, we're not going to get to the year 2050, guys, and have, like, driverless cars and Wi-Fi on every corner, but we're still going to have kids being bullied and human trafficking. Like, we've got to be working on both those types of things, right? So I'd always kind of say, well, we should actually try to create those systems. But I thought I should join the Army because I was just really interested in trying something different. I was really kind of seduced by this sense of culture shock. And yeah, as you might imagine, there's a lot of anecdotes from that. It's a lot of the stock characters, the hard-ass sergeant, the funny sergeant, the people from all different walks of life. So there's a lot of anecdotes, a lot of surprises, actually. I caught myself stereotyping the experience and then realizing that I had been wrong. But I mean, I could go on and on about these anecdotes, but what I want to talk about today is brainwashing, because that's what my good friends kept bringing up. They kept saying, you're going to totally get brainwashed. And I thought, well, no, I studied anthropology. That's impossible. But also, I know a thing or two about brainwashing, and it is that it only works if you don't realize it's happening. If you're aware that it's happening, then you're fine. So I went in on the lookout for subtle brainwashing tactics that I could spot and then just be aware of it. As long as I'm aware of them, I'm there. And at the beginning, it wasn't too hard, actually. It wasn't terribly subtle. When you get the forms at the beginning, the paper, when you go to boot camp, which is a basic training of 13 weeks, very first thing you do, you get this manual, and the first 5 weeks, you're not allowed off base. After 5 weeks, then you kind of get weekends off sometimes, if you're lucky. But the first 5 weeks, you're not allowed off base because it is called the indoctrination period. It is literally called that. In all of the books, like, sorry, we can't let you go during the indoctrination period. You're actually not even allowed to quit, I think, during the indoctrination period. If you do, I think you have to go to jail for the length of the indoctrination period. So the idea is, obviously, that it's going to suck at first, you're going to call your parents, you're going to cry, but after 5 weeks, wall-to-wall, hanging out with your platoon, it's going to sink in, and then you're going to be a community. I thought, okay, that's fair. So I saw that, and then I started looking out for the more subtle things. And the subtle things came in all shapes and sizes. They come in sort of appealing to romantic ideals. So I remember our warrant officer Wallace, who was this sort of like stern military dad character. He's an older gentleman, and he was the head of our unit. You've got your sergeants who do the subgroups, so your platoon is split into 4 subgroups. You're in 4 groups. Each group has a sergeant. I got Sergeant McIntyre, who was like this Irish Montrealer guy. It's like if you took Chris Farley and made him really fit, but still kind of crazy with beady eyes. And so that was me. And then some people got the like handsome French sergeant, Sergeant Sénéchal, who was as handsome as that sounds. I don't think he was born. I think he was just chiseled straight out of granite rock one day. And he was very quiet. I think because his French was much stronger than his English, but also because he was a ninja, I believe. He had boots that were not like anybody else's black combat boots, and I swear, this could be the sleep deprivation talking, but I'm certain I've seen this man walk through a pile of dry leaves and not make a sound. It was extraordinary. I was like a ghost. So there were other people, hard-ass sergeants, Sergeant Pepin, who reminded you that he came up from being a Navy cook, so don't fuck with him. I don't know why. And then at the top of this, Sergeant Pepin was the head sergeant, and then you've got Warrant Officer Wallace. And beyond that, you don't want to know who is above that. If you ever, during boot camp, meet anyone above a warrant officer, it's because you're in deep shit. So best not. Warrant Officer Wallace kind of like always cocked his head like a rooster in an Air Force uniform. And he would do this. He would kind of pry his eyebrow up when you asked a dumb question, which was usually when you thought to ask anything at all. And because he was older, he didn't do a lot of the field stuff with us, but he would do a lot of the classroom lessons, the military history, military structure, military law. And he would talk to us about the 4 military principles, the 4 values, which were, in this order, duty, loyalty, integrity, and courage. He said it just like that. 10 times a day, every day. We knew that. We knew that would happen. So, I mean, that wasn't terribly subtle. It was this appeal to some kind of broader kind of social norm, which was cool. Then there were the, subtle but not really, also like, obviously it's the Army, the sergeants are gonna give you all kinds of activities to do that you can't possibly do in the amount of time. You're gonna do this, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do this, and you're gonna come back and you're gonna do this, and you're gonna report on this. Okay, that's it, that's all. Great, too easy, and a lot of them French-Canadian accents, so it was really entertaining. Too easy. They love saying that. Your life was a series of, that's it, that's all. Too easy. And hurry up and wait. It was a lot of hurry up and wait. Or if you had a question for some reason and they didn't want to answer you, they would say, more to follow. More to follow. That means more to follow. Which was a nice way of saying, shut up and you'll know when you know. But the idea to this was obviously to make you essentially give up on wanting answers, to relinquish your autonomy, and to just trust whatever order is coming to you from the chain of command. So you will rush to do something, and then get to where you need to go, and then wait for 3.5 hours for no discernible reason. And that was sort of to break you down, make you trust, and then build a community. I'm like, okay, I'm spotting this. I'm a little stressed out. I get it. I'm sleep deprived, but this is what it's about. What I could not have prepared myself for was the brainwashing that wasn't even trying to be subtle. It was, in fact, just telling you what was going on. And there's no better illustration for this than drill. Now, drill, for those of you who don't necessarily know the word, is what the Army calls marching. And marching is what you do all the time, everywhere. If you're a basic training recruit, you actually can't move around a base walking normally. You have to march with the exaggerated arms up and the feet very crisp. And the interesting thing about drill is that you suck at it at the beginning. You look really funny. You look like a baby duck. And because it's hard. I mean, it's just an exaggerated walk, but it's very hard to systematize your movement and to do it the same way every time. And then when you're marching in a group together, it's very hard to, at the beginning, time your movements with other people. Sometimes 80 other people. That's kind of the size of a platoon. 80, 90, 100 people who are, different heights and have different lengths of step and react differently to beat. So you suck, but it's kind of interesting because you do get better at it. But most of our, in the initial indoctrination period, in the first few weeks, we would have maybe 4 or 5 drill lessons per week of at least 2 hours long, sometimes 2 a day, to practice drill, formal drill, not just get around the base drill, but drill so that you can do marching movements and parades and stuff. And the typical early days drill lesson would kind of go like this. We would sort of all be in a group, sort of just in formation, maybe 30, 30, 30, we're 3 rows deep. And sergeant who was in charge that day would come and kind of steady us up, which means that we're all standing next to our gear or whatever. And the sergeant goes, platoon, very quietly, almost as a test, platoon. And the idea there is that you're supposed to kind of just get ready. You're not quite at attention yet, you just kind of get ready. And then when the sergeant goes, platoon, for real, then your arms actually go up. You're not at attention yet. This is just called standing easy, believe it or not. This is called stand easy. And sometimes we do it for 2 hours. But once you're standing easy, then the order comes, which is platoon, atten ha! Just like that. They'd never say the full word. You were just supposed to know. And you hear that and then you snap to attention, right? And then you're facing in a long row the sergeant, but the sergeant wants you all to face just sort of forward. So only 3 of you are facing forward and you're gonna move like a large snail. And so they want you to turn right. And they get you to turn right by saying, move to the right in threes. Right, ta! Just like that. And then you sort of pivot and snap, and your foot comes back down, and then you're ready to go. And now you're going to start marching. And you always start marching with your left foot first, so they go, by the left, quick, ma! That's it. And then you start. And when you start, it's a very familiar sound. You know, marching on a column, it sounds kind of like this. It goes, you probably know the sound. Sort of like a cat purring or maybe a horse coughing. Or if you've seen any movie at all, it's the sound of the Nazis taking Paris. That's what it sounds like. That's what it always sounds like. When the Americans take a village, there's always like music and cheering and Dutch people taking their clothes off to say thanks. But when the Nazis take Paris, that's the sound. It's so you know it. What I discovered was that that's the sound of, you know, good enough or pretty good marching. I discovered later on, and I'll tell you about that, that amazing marching sounds different, and it's rare. But so we would start, we go, and you know, at the beginning, just so that we don't lose the beat right away, the sergeant does what you've also seen in movies. It goes like left, right, left. Regardless of whether they're francophone or anglophone, everyone adopts this weird American Southern drawl when they're calling out marching. It's weird. So you go left, right, and then occasionally, you know, you're getting better and says, I just left. Like, okay, cool. And then if you were really lucky, you'd get a song. A marching song, but it was like weeks later, like, when I get to heaven, St. Peter's gonna say, you don't want to know the rest of it, it's super dirty. But it was like that. Anyway, these are the early weeks, so we're just getting left, right. And inevitably, you know, we get off to a good start, and then we start kind of losing each other. You know, we're 3 across and 30 deep. We just start kind of losing each other, we lose the beat. And God help us, the moment we need to turn a corner. Because when you turn a corner, you've probably seen the, you know, game Snake, where the snake turns. Well, you turn a corner and it's like, oh, we're gonna lose it completely because there's a marker on the floor. And the people on the inside of the turn are gonna have to take a slightly shorter step. And on the outside part of the column, they're gonna take a longer step. And the moment we come out of the turn, it's just gonna be a gong show. We're not even gonna be aligned anymore, which is exactly what would happen. And, you know, we'd see it and we'd kind of hate each other, like, oh, you messed up. No, you did. And the sergeant, I guess, was seeing this. Kind of brings us back to the left, right. And I guess he thinks he's going to give us a pep talk. So he gets us to come back toward him. And we're marching, we're back to it, and he goes, platoon, halt. It's probably the only word they would say in full, halt. And you call halt on the left foot, and you take 2 more steps, boom, boom, and then down again. So now you're stopped. Now he wants to talk to us, and we're all facing forward, and he needs to get us to face broadside. So he goes, move to the right in threes, right, da! And we snap back and we pivot. Now we're facing. It's like, stand easy, okay. And this was the pep talk. He goes, why do we do drill? In the olden days, drill was a legitimate battlefield tactic. If you could organize your troops in tight formations, shields up and spears out, you could literally mow down your enemy's lines and instill absolute fear in their generals. But now we have tanks and missiles and planes. No one's marching into battle. Why do we still do drill? There's like a few hands that go up, like tradition, discipline. Like, yeah, tradition, discipline, team spirit. Yeah, team spirit. And he goes, we do drill to accustom your bodies to react and move instinctively at the sound of my voice. Pep talk. In the same way that we do weapons training for hours, and you hate it because you do this 7-step process. That is designed so that if we are engaged in a firefight and your weapon jams, all you need to do, even if you are in shock, is hear the sound of my voice yell, reload, and you will instinctively, through muscle memory, reload your weapon and continue firing forward to maintain firing supremacy for the unit. By the same token, if we are in a battlefield and I give you an order like, charge that hill and take that position, I need to know that you will do it instantaneously at the sound of my voice, even if it is the cost of your own life. And at this point, we're standing easy, so everybody else in the platoon and the formation is kind of giving each other a face like, yeah, that makes sense, actually. That's just true. And I am standing there thinking, holy shit, I am in the army right now. This actually happened, and there is no going back. What's crazy about that is that it's just right in your face. They're not even trying to pretend that they're gonna lie to you and endanger your life. And yet, drill is super compelling. And it kind of gets fun, because you get good at it. And then you feel amazing. Your body feels amazing. A few weeks after that episode, we're marching, it's probably week 6, week 7, and we're marching to lunch in the caverns of this giant, awful building called the Mega, which are the barracks for basic training. And we're marching, and suddenly we realize, I realized at least, that we're marching and it's not as it should, which is a perfectly lovely sound, but it just means that there's a few heels that aren't hitting the ground at the same time. So you get that sort of purring, that right? So that's a bunch of feet hitting, not at the exact same moment. But instead of that, it was just more like crazy. It was like we were a giant. Like just one giant just walking down the halls, and it resonates inside your bones very differently. And even the hard-ass sergeant who's kind of marching us is calling like left, right, and you realize that he doesn't need to do this anymore because we're just doing it perfectly. And we get to about where the lunch hall is, and you know, he calls us to halt. He's like, platoon, halt! And instead of the normal sound, which is, you know, you're gonna do 2 steps and then down, so instead it's boom. It was nuts. Everybody, well, most people around me at least, in the formation, you could hear them go, like, did we just do that with our own bodies? Together? And so now we're in formation, and the sergeant, before he dismisses us, he's gonna say a few things, I'm sure. And so he gets us to turn broadside again and goes, move to the left in 3s, left, turn. And again, instead of, which is how a turn should sound, instead it was just, boom. What just happened? Even there's like some more like older recruits who are just looking like, what was that? And even the hard-ass sergeant's like, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. So that's how it should be every day now, from now until graduation. And it wasn't. It was never like that again. Any day, he was like, that's how it always should be. And the week 10 guys are looking at us like, no, we're not even like that. That was crazy, amazing fluke. And so we went to lunch, but I remember thinking, like, that was an extraordinary moment because I felt unbelievably connected as one to 90 other people. And I realized that maybe the most amazing or the most powerful form of brainwashing isn't really the one you don't notice, but it's the one you're actually co-creating with the other party and loving and thinking to yourself, this is so cool. So we went to lunch, and for the rest of that lunch, I was very, very quiet because I kept thinking to myself, okay, I still believe what I believe, but we're gonna need to come up with some pretty powerful replacement experiences and feelings if we're ever gonna make gentle the life of this world. And thank you for indulging me.